Hello viewers, it's Josie. Welcome back to Eclectic Movie Reviews and Updates. And this is the second part of my Small Axe review as Black History Month comes to a close, but nevertheless, Black history should always be noticed, not just in February. And in this video, as I said at the end of the previous video, I will be taking each film of the Small Axe anthology and pairing it with another film that has thematic similarities. Now, please note that not that with some of the pairings, the stories may be different, but I'm focusing on the important themes. So, I was inspired to do this by the Pure Cinema podcast, and what they do is that they in some episodes is that they look at a director and they pair each film from their filmography to another film that has similar themes. So, to reiterate, I'm trying to follow that format. So, here I go. The first film in the anthology, Mangrove. Mangrove is about the trial of the Mangrove Nine. They were a group of black rights activists in England who, in 1970, protested against the racial profiling of the Mangrove Trinidadian restaurant. For those who do not know the story of the Mangrove Nine, this restaurant was a place for social gatherings of black individuals in the Notting Hill area of London. On a constant basis, the restaurant was bombarded by police, followed by false accusations of prostitution and drug possession. On August 9th, 1970, 150 black people paraded to the police station as a form of protest. Consequently, police violently intervened and several arrests were made. Additionally, there were threats of deportation since many of the black people were immigrants from the Caribbean. What later ensued was a 55-day trial. This brings me to the editing of Mangrove. It is beautiful, particularly in the protest and trial scenes. Steve McQueen is known for his longer takes. While there are cuts between the shots of the court scenes, it is refreshing to see that they do not take place every 5 seconds, if you know what I mean. There is some breathing room. Had they been constant, not only would it have been cliche, but it would not have made the scenes feel like actual court proceedings taking place. The acting ensemble is spectacular. The cast does an incredible job at creating an authentic feeling of community between the Mangrove Nine, especially Sean Parks as Frank Critchlow. As of today, the only 2 members of the Mangrove Nine are still alive. Althea Jones LeCointe, I could be butchering her name. She's played by Letitia Wright. And Barbara Beese. She's played by Rochenda Sandel. I am pairing Mangrove with a band documentary from 1978 called Black's Britannica, which takes note of the systemic prejudice against the black community in the 1970s. It chronicles police brutality, economic inequality, and anti-immigration policies, 3 issues currently taking place in the United States. At one point, there was a brief montage of Enoch Powell, Margaret Thatcher, John Kingsley Reid, and Harold Wilson all describing strategies on what to do with immigration in England. Sound familiar? And there's a scene in Mangrove where Barbara Beese, wife of Darcus Ho, is worried about being deported. And Darcus Ho, played by Malachi Kirby, one of the members of the Mangrove Nine, actually has an appearance in this film. In the protest scene of Mangrove, the marchers say, the pigs, we gotta get rid of the pigs. The actual footage from the real-life protest is shown. In another scene, a contributor claims that racism did not originate in the United States. In fact, he stresses that it began in England but was carried over to the United States. The history of the Black's Britannica's release is worth looking into to exemplify the ways in which true history is kept from the public. The director of this movie, David Koff, was forced to recut it so that any acts of institutional racism in England documented on screen would be hidden under the rug. The public broadcasting affiliate WGHB Boston justified their action of censorship as an example of editorial integrity. In fact, one of the quotes that got cut from the film by a claim, which is a claim by a former police commissioner named Robert Mark, he said that violent crimes such as murder or rape are less of a concern than the tendency of people to use violence to achieve political or industrial ends. David Fanning, one of the producers, feared the idea of the Marxist ideologies presented to audiences. The predicament of blacks highlights the inability of British capitalism to deliver the goods. If we can't get what we want under capitalism, well then capitalism has to go. This goes to show you how the fear of socialism that we currently see in the United States with all these conspiracy theories from QAnon are not new. They date back to even the 1930s and 40s. Black's Britannica is available to watch for free on YouTube. I would love to see Criterion curate it. I love when Criterion Channel features old or underseen documentaries. Now, moving forward to Lovers Rock, along with a lot of other people in the film blockosphere, if you will, this, as well as Education, is probably my favorite of the anthology. Unlike Mangrove, it is not based on a true story. However, Steve McQueen drew inspiration from stories his aunt told him. Simply stated, Lovers Rock is about a nighttime house party with romance and music. The main characters are Martha, played by Amara J. St. Aubin, and Franklin, played by Michael Ward. Spoiler alert, Steve McQueen makes the song Kung Fu Fighting cool again. Also, the choreography is amazing. It's a wee bit lighter than Mangrove, which makes it refreshing to watch. And as I said in the previous video, my introduction, it gives the viewer a break from the political side. And what's great about this is that we get to see a Black filmmaker with Black actors not just focus on race. And to me, it's always empowering to see that happen, because it shows that they're not defining themselves by their skin color. And structurally speaking, I think this reminds audiences that politics aside, Black people are human beings too. They need connection with others. According to Steve McQueen, house parties like this were held as an opportunity for Afro-Caribbean immigrants to socialize. This ties back to how the Mangrove restaurant was designed as a safe space for Black people to engage in social activity. This is not to say that Steve McQueen completely shies away from any conflict. In fact, without giving any spoilers away, there is one particular male character who's a total jerk. Again, I'm not gonna say what happens. All in all, Steve McQueen gorgeously captures the communal experience of Black joy. I am pairing Lovers Rock with the 1982 romance called Cane River. This was directed by Horace B. Jenkins, no relation to Barry Jenkins, not that I know of anyway. Unfortunately, This was the only movie Horace Jenkins directed since he died of a heart attack when he was only 42. After Horace Jenkins died, the release of the film was canceled. Unfortunately, the film remained lost until 2013 when a film preservation organization called Indie Direct discovered a negative copy from Do Art Film and Video. A 35mm archive print of the film was made by the Academy Film Archive, followed by a 4K resolution by Indie Collect. Cane River, in its digitally remastered form, was screened at the New Orleans Film Festival on October 22, 2018, and at the Museum of Modern Art in January 2019. In October 2019, Oscilloscope Laboratories picked up the film for distribution and screened the film in February of last year. Since June, it has been streaming on the Criterion Channel. It would be great if it could get a Blu-ray release. It's really wonderful how films by Black filmmakers are slowly being rediscovered and remastered. This summer, for instance, I would not have found the films of Oscar Micheaux had they not been put on the Criterion Channel. The story follows an aspiring writer named Peter as he returns to his homeland, Cane River, and falls for a local tour guide named Maria. Peter comes from a mixed-race Creole background, and he and Maria both discovered that his estate was established by a formerly enslaved African woman who married into a white slave-owning family. Additionally, it is found out that Peter had family who assisted in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Thus, Creoles and darker-skinned blacks do not associate with one another in Cane River. Maria's mother does not approve of her relationship with Peter. In spite of Peter and Maria's oppositional background, it's an extremely sweet love story. And as far as connections to Lovers Rock, the cinematography of both films explore the meaning of freedom. Shabir Kirchner's shots of everyone dancing at the party in Lovers Rock has just as much of a rhythm as the music of the party. The close-up shots of men holding onto the waists of the women and the collective shots of the pairs all singing and dancing in unison makes the joy and freedom celebrated by the characters feel extra authentic. By comparison, Richard Brody from The New Yorker asserts, Jenkins, working with the cinematographer Gideon Manasseh, films the couple with an ardent lyricism that catches their youthful high-spiritedness, smart banter, and physical grace and vigorous motion. In Lovers Rock, the party is a free space where Martha and Franklin, just as how the outdoors is where Peter and Maria feel the freest in Cane River. Additionally, soundtracks play a key role in both films. Granted, some of the song choices in Cane River are a little cheesy because it was made in the 80s, same time frame as Lovers Rock takes place. Another connecting theme is that of female independence. Both female leads are inclined to follow certain obligations. Maria, of course, is pressured by her mother to stay away from Peter. Similarly, in Lovers Rock, Martha's mother doesn't want her going to the blues parties, and she has to make it home for church in the morning. That part of the narrative was inspired by stories that Steve McQueen's aunt told him about how she wasn't allowed to go to the Lovers Rock parties. When she would go, his uncle would leave the back door open so that she could make it home for church the next day, just like in Lovers Rock. Evidently, both Maria and Martha want to make choices for themselves without parental control. Most notably, despite both films feeling hopeful in the romantic sense, the women do not define themselves by having a partner. In Lovers Rock, Martha doesn't just go to the parties to meet guys, but also just to simply have fun. Likewise, although Maria loves Peter, this does not stop her from making the decision to go to college. Cane River, as I said, is streaming on the Criterion Channel. It would be great if it was released on Blu-ray. I could see a company like Kino, Arrow, or even Fun City Editions putting this out. Next is Red, White, and Blue. This is based on the true story of Leroy Rogan, played by John Boyega. uh, who most people know from the new recent Star Wars movies. Leroy Rogan is a former research scientist who joins the Metropolitan Police with the intention of reforming it after his father gets assaulted by policemen. However, his father is unhappy with his decision given the trauma he experienced. With what is reported on the news a lot today, it is easy to assume that there are absolutely no black people who want to join the police force. People forget that there are black policemen, and a lot feel conflicted about the politics of policing. This film clearly exemplifies the favoritism that occurs in the police force. Mark Kermode points out in his review that what makes John Boyega's performance stand out so much is that he balances the eagerness to be a policeman and the anxiety of it. John Boyega was very proud of this film. He said that Steve McQueen was the best director he worked with. And there's a funny part where he's telling somebody, I want to join the Force, and then they reply, like a Jedi, making a connection to Star Wars. Despite Leroy being good at his job, racial slurs are said to him by the other cops. And they write nasty comments on his locker. There's a scene where Leroy Rogan calls for backup, but doesn't receive it. He even yells at his fellow police colleagues, "Why don't you back me? I'm out there on the field with no backup." This was not depicted in the episode, but another issue that occurs in law enforcement today that I think is important to address is nepotism. A lot of policemen are hired because they're related to somebody who's already in the force. All in all, what can be learned from this segment is that racism is not only a serious issue black people face from the police, but also within the police. I had a hard time trying to find a pairing with this one. I went with the animated Disney movie Zootopia. Don't laugh. And I know the stories are different, but I will go into the thematic connections. Although Zootopia inevitably won Best Animated Feature at the Oscars, I'm surprised people don't talk about it as much, especially since it's even more relevant today. I rewatched this a couple of days ago, and it really holds up after 5 years. I honestly think it's better than some of the recent Pixar films. Zootopia takes place in an anthropomorphic world where predators and prey were once enemies, but now live and work together. Even so, there is still implicit prejudice. I remember when this first came out, it was rightfully praised for its allegorical approach to teaching children about racism in a digestible and clever way. The narrative depicts the blunt truth how implicit biases many of us share are shaped by what we're taught, whether it be by news headlines or even what we're taught in school, sadly. As far as more of the story, Judy Hopps, voiced by Jennifer Goodwin, becomes the first rabbit police officer, similar to how Leroy Logan was one of the first black officers in the force. Obviously, since rabbits are known to be cute, she's not really taken seriously upon entering the force. The police chief Bogo, voiced by Idris Elba, is skeptical of her abilities. While other officers are getting more interesting tasks, if you will, Judy Hopps' first assignment from Chief Bogo, before cracking the Missile Mammal case, of course, is working as a meter maid. She meets a con artist Fox, played by Nick Wilde, voiced by Jason Bateman, and he helps her solve the missing mammal case. It's funny, as I rewatched this after watching Ozark last April, I can't help but notice that in both Zootopia and Ozark, Jason Bateman plays a character who earns money through illegal means. Of course, in Ozark, money laundering, and then in Zootopia, he recycles popsicle sticks and sells them. Chief Bogo's initial doubting of Judy in Zootopia echoes how John Boyega's character's fellow white officers are given seniority over him. In addition to racism, there is a history of sexism within the police force, so Zootopia is clearly commenting on that here. The protagonists of both Red, White, and Blue and Zootopia are minority idealistic cops who feel the need to prove themselves. They both have the intention of making the world a better place, but face barriers set up by majority authorities. To refer back to earlier, inequality not only exists in the cities the police are supposed to protect, but also within the force. That being said, the theme that connects both movies together the most is the imbalance of police power. Both narratives achieve this by going into the perspective of a cop experiencing it. And the next film is Alex Wheatle. This is based on the real-life story of an author with the same name. For the majority of his childhood, he resided in the Shirley Oaks' children's home. When he was 16, he became a DJ. This is all portrayed in the film. In 1981, he participated in the Brixton riots and was sent to prison for it. In prison, he befriends a guy who is also a poet. In turn, he's inspired to write poetry. Alex Wheatle is still alive today and is the author of quite a few novels, including Brixton Rock, the Cronkton Knights trilogy, and most recently, Cane Warriors, which happens to be at my library. Today, he teaches creative writing for children and young adults at Manchester Metropolitan University. It's just really incredible to see someone who went through such obstacles overcome them and become successful. This does not, however, undo the trauma that occurred in Alex Wheatle's life. In fact, Alex Wheatle himself states in an article for The Guardian, "I have my nightmarish moments where sometimes my past comes back and hits me when I'm not expecting it. But that's okay. It doesn't make me weak. It makes me more empathetic with people who go through those experiences, and it helps my writing when I'm creating characters who experience stress and trauma." I am pairing this one with a documentary called And When I Die, I Won't Stay Dead, Bob Kaufman Poet, directed by Billy Woodbury. This, too, is about a poet, clearly in the title. Bob Kaufman was one of the early beat poets. Similar to Alex Wheatle, Bob Kaufman essentially got in trouble by the police for expressing himself. In the documentary, Woodbury shows how the lyrics of Bob Kaufman's poetry challenged political ideologies. Police would attack Kaufman for reading his poems aloud. This parallels Alex Wheatle's imprisonment for participating in the Brixton riot. When pairing these two films together, it is clear that when we take Black writers seriously, we learn so much from their point of view about how they're marginalized in society, and also, more importantly, what they have to offer society, and we can learn how to treat them equally. It is on Canopy, which you can get through your library card if your library is connected to it. And finally, Education. This is about a boy named Kingsley who dreams of going to space. He's highly skilled of math and science, but has trouble reading. He receives ostracism from his teachers for his hyperactivity and reading struggles. Kingsley is then placed in a subnormal school. Certainly, the teachers and administration do not do it for Kingsley's sake, but rather for maintaining their reputation with high test scores. Not only do they want to maintain their reputation, but also the whiteness of the school. It is almost as if they view being black-skinned as a disability. Undoubtedly, Kingsley is way too high-functioning for the special school. Anne Hornaday in the Washington Post points out that students in the subnormal schools are warehoused, neglected, and funneled into menial jobs, an issue that sadly takes place in the United States today. Kingsley's mother takes part in a group of West Indian mothers that advocate for fair, inclusive education. Kingsley's sister is also highly supportive and encouraging of him. She acts as another parental figure to him, kind of. Education is a very personal story to Steve McQueen because he had trouble reading as a kid in addition to stuttering. He still stutters in his interviews sometimes. There's a scene where Kingsley is in the special school where someone sings a really bad cover of House of the Rising Sun by the Animals. And according to Steve McQueen, that actually happened to him. He says in a Zoom interview, it was that song. The teacher brought his guitar. Obviously, it was his thing, and we were his audience. And the fact that it was by the Animals was kind of interesting too. But at the time, I knew it. I was alert to it. But it was like, you know that horrible feeling when you're awake, but you're still asleep and you're saying, wake up, wake up, wake up? It was like that. Now, growing up on the autism spectrum, I really connected with this one because I had to, of course, I had to persevere in my education, and my mom was a big advocate for me. Education points out how the marginalization of the Black community in schools is not just an issue in the United States, but in the UK as well. Steve McQueen is not deliberately beating us over the head with the message that we need to improve special education. Rather, it's a personal story. Nevertheless, the audience sees through Kingsley's experience the necessity of such needed change. Now, the young actor who plays Kingsley, Kenya Sandy, is wonderful in this. He doesn't play it overly cute. He feels like a real life kid struggling academically and like knowing from what I gone through and like seeing what other people who were in similar situations as me have gone through, it really feels true to life. But this also speaks to the brilliance of Steve McQueen's writing of this series. I had a hard time finding a movie to pair this one with. I thought it would be way too obvious if I went with a school movie. So I'm going with an animated movie called The Point. It is directed by Fred Wolf, who created the famous Tootsie Pop commercials. The animation is absolutely adorable. When I have children, I will definitely show this to them. It features memorable songs by Harry Nilsson and is narrated by Ringo Starr. In a world where everyone has a pointed head, there is a boy named Oblio, voiced by Mike Lookinlad from the Brady Bunch, who has a round head. Because of this deformed feature, he is cast away into the pointless forest where he, accompanied by his dog Arrow, embarks on a journey of self-acceptance and self-discovery. The special school and education is essentially Kingsley's pointless forest. Oblio banished, yet discovering he does have a point in his existence, yes, the pun's intended, parallels how Kingsley is ostracized, yet is persevering in terms of learning how to read. Overall, both films ask us to think about how we handle children who are different than us. Like, how do we bring them up in society when they may have different needs or abilities than other kids. Another reason why these two pair well is their lengths. Education is an hour long, and The Point is only about 75 minutes. The Point is available to watch for free on Tubi. It is also now on Blu-ray through the MVD Rewind collection. And that will do it for my Small Axe two-parter review. I worked really hard on this, and I'm really happy that I got to share it with you. If you like this video, then you can click the like button and subscribe so you'll be notified for more movie reviews and positive poems. You can also follow me on Instagram at Eclectic Movie Updates and to check out my poetry, positive poems. I'm also on Letterboxd. You can follow me at Eclectic Movies. And see you next time. Goodbye for now.